Hello everyone, Kyle here. Today I'm going to be discussing what I believe to be one of the most important conversations in the field of rhetoric and composition today, that of fake news. This conversation matters and can be better understood by applying a theoretical frame developed by Richard Weaver, whose work is grounded in the idea that words are not neutral. First, let's take a look at how fake news is composed and circulated. There are two main points that need to be understood in relation to this issue of fake news in our current communication climate. One, journalists are not the enemy, but they are also not always able to be completely objective, nor are they as keenly aware of the sometimes subversive nature of rhetoric, putting them all at the risk of circulating fake news. The best example of this issue is apparent in the now viral collection of television journalists reading a blanket statement handed down from corporate ownership on the topic of fake news itself. NBC News best explains this in the following video.
A synchronized script.
Some media outlets publish these same fake stories
On dozens of local news stations. Same words, same message. Mandated by the same station owner, Sinclair Broadcasting Group.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Tonight, the corporation behind that commentary, defiant and digging in after this video, posted by Deadspin, went viral. In an internal memo obtained by NBC News, a Sinclair executive lists its journalism awards, and in a statement to reporters writes, "We find it curious that we would be attacked for asking our news people to remind their audiences that unsubstantiated stories exist on social media." Some critics see it differently.
It's odd to see all of these anchors saying the same thing at the same time with the words that have come out of one central location in Baltimore, Maryland. That's not our tradition in the United States. It's massive propaganda.
The broadcast group, which skews more conservative, owns or operates more than 190 stations, including 15 NBC affiliates. 2/3 of those stations are in Trump country. The company wants to buy Tribune, a merger that would put its stations in 3 of every 4 households in the U.S., but it needs approval from the FCC first. The president, seeming supportive, tweeting today, "It's so funny to watch fake news networks criticize Sinclair Broadcasting, calling the company far superior to fake NBC, a promo blasting fake news, now creating very real headlines." Hallie Jackson, NBC News, Washington.
As the journalism professor attests in the story, this type of propaganda in the media is dangerous to our democracy because it erodes media credibility. Which brings me to my second point regarding the uptick in fake news and the threat it poses to all of us as citizens in the United States. That is that our own president continues to consistently use rhetorical tactics to confuse and to drum up his base supporters. The following video, created by UC Berkeley professor of public policy Robert Reich, explains just how simplistic yet effective his rhetorical tactics are.
Trump uses 5 tactics to create a fog of confusion and bewilderment, so we don't pay attention to the damage he's doing. His first tactic is to distract us. Dominate the news with tweets and rants, accusations, who he's fired, who he's insulted, what he's demanded. He wants us to be so preoccupied with all this that we lose sight of the big picture, how he's undermining our democracy, rewarding the rich and hurting the working class, middle class, and the poor, stoking hatefulness, undercutting America's standing in the world. His second tactic is to divide and conquer. He pits groups against each other, riles up his base, stokes racial tensions, vilifies opponents, targeting transgender people in the military, going after athletes, mostly black, who won't stand for the anthem, fueling fears of immigrants and foreigners, of liberals and Democrats. This way, public dialogue and discussion becomes so angry, bitter, and vitriolic that we end up shouting at each other instead of seeing the damage Trump is actually doing. Third, lie and distort. He generates a torrent of alternative facts, so we become disoriented and confused, asserting that 3 to 5 million people fraudulently voted for Hillary Clinton in the last election with no evidence they did, that unauthorized immigrants are responsible for a disproportionate number of murders and rapes.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists.
That climate change isn't caused by people. His goal is for us to lose confidence in the truth so we can't be sure of what he's doing. Fourth, conjure up conspiracies. He fuels paranoia about a deep state that's intent on removing him from office, engaged in a witch hunt to undermine him, plotting to impeach him. But he never identifies who or what this deep state actually is. The mere assertion of a conspiracy is enough to generate suspicion, erode trust in the political system and in the media, and sow doubts about anyone who criticizes him or any findings that could show he acted illegally. Fifth and finally, accuse the accusers. He alleges that others are doing what he is in fact doing. When the media catch him in a lie, he accuses them of disseminating fake news. He allows corporate lobbyists to run departments and agencies, and then accuses critics of being part of the Washington swamp. He seeks to cover up whatever he and his aides did with Russian operatives, and then accuses investigators of being involved in a cover-up. These 5 tactics are all designed to hide what Trump is actually doing, so we don't mobilize against him. Be aware. Don't allow Trump's fog to cloud the truth.
So now that we've established the prevalence of fake news and the rhetorical strategies and biases behind it, I will discuss rhetorical theories that influence the phenomenon. This discussion leads to my final argument, which is that I believe personal responsibility has to be applied to the rhetoric we encounter daily, especially as it applies to online communication, if we are all to survive as a democracy in the age of fake news. So, in order to understand the fake news phenomenon and to put it into context, we need to look at the rhetorical theory and think about how our own biases and intellectual laziness plays into the spread of false and dangerous information. So, rhetorical theorist Richard Weaver uses his essay Language is Sermonic to explain that facts don't exist in a vacuum, and rhetoric is more important than ever. Weaver focuses on the importance of words as rhetorical, so our discussion must begin with this premise. Further, Weaver understands that rhetorics are seeking to connect with audiences, and they should take into consideration the character and situation of the audience. Although Weaver purports that using rhetoric to convey information is a good thing, Stanley Fish, counters by putting the argument in the context of our current digital age, where access to infinite amounts of information, often tailored to use by algorithms, prohibits our ability to see the counterarguments and fallacies we encounter daily. So, building on Weaver's argument that everything is biased, Stanley Fish argues that there's no such thing as free speech. Now, you might be asking yourself, whoa, okay, Stanley Fish, is he crazy? Yeah, he might be, but he also has a good point. And that point is that digital platforms today provide us with opportunities as audiences and authors, as long as we have access to the internet, of course, to have a platform to speak upon. So some people argue more speakers are good for free speech. Other people, like Stanley Fish, kind of argue the opposite and basically say it's an allusion to the advancement of the First Amendment. So in his article, Transparency is the Mother of Fake News, Fish argues against the belief that information is circulated without bias. So further, he notes that instant communication has the tendency to simplify ideas, and it also plays into politics, as politicians create simple-to-understand messages. And they just do that inherently. So in other words, technology doesn't proliferate original thought. So free speech, especially in online spaces, means that there is more information to digest, and when there's more information available, the public distrusts traditional forms of media, which Fish argues is bad and serves as the origin of his fake news claims. If we buy into Fish's argument that free speech is bad, then we must conclude that there are times when speech should be censored. However, as a former journalist, I know there's a need to make sure that the public knows information presented always comes with a bias, no matter how big or small. A point revealed in the Sinclair video. Journalists present biased information because they're people, and people come to situations with their own perspectives and backgrounds, thus affecting how they see things or perceive the world around them. Scientists and other professionals are victim to the same bias. So really, information can never be objective, only rhetorical. In Richard Vatz's essay, The Myth of the Rhetorical Situation, it also sheds light on why personal responsibility matters when it comes to all rhetoric. While Vatz argues that responsibility falls on the Redder, in today's internet age when rhetoric circulates on numerous platforms and through ubiquitous technologies, that responsibility has shifted to the media consumer, to all of us. The videos and theories above all make this point more obvious. So here we come to two main conclusions about the fake news and information we are fed daily via the internet. All right? One, it's overwhelming to put into context because there is so much of it. And two, even with a heightened awareness that fake news exists and is rhetorical, what can we do about it? In their work, A Grammar of Multiliteracies, Mary Kalinatsis and Bill Cope deliver a framework that serves as a starting point to spot and unravel fake news. And by applying some of the same grammatical questions we ask of alphabetic texts, Kalinatsis and Cope argue we can better understand the context and meaning behind language choices, purpose, and design with some simple questions. What do meanings refer to and describe? How do the meanings or dialogue connect the people in the action described? How is the text structured so that the overall meanings hang together? How are meanings situated and shaped by their context? And whose purposes and interests are these meanings designed to serve? These 5 questions serve as a starting point in understanding how fake news stories and information are created and how to become aware of our own biases. A critical step to combat the damage they are doing. However, although we often hear a lot of lament from everyone about fake news, what we do know is that by understanding and applying rhetorical theory, we don't have to be passive consumers of it, but rather we're better equipped to recognize it, intervene by pointing out its flaws, and hopefully help to educate others to stop its spread. Realizing, as Richard Weaver did, that words are not neutral, they're never neutral, is the first step towards understanding the vast amounts of news and rhetoric we consume daily. It is through the lens of understanding the inherent bias of all communication, no matter how extreme, that we can begin to chip away at the fake news phenomenon.